just a little bit with the sermon series that my pastor has been going through. So we have been working our way through Genesis, which I started attending the church I'm currently a member of at the beginning of the year. And I had already decided, like through my video series and things like that, that I was going to be working my way through, Genesis. And probably actually how I want to do it is like Genesis and Exodus, and then we'll do something that's a little bit more short through like Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. Really just because I think the Pentateuch is so important, both for Christians and it plays such an important role in what we see later on in the New Testament. But we have been almost finished up with Genesis now. So actually the first sermon I heard for Genesis was actually the one about Noah, and about the dove and the raven. But the last 3 weeks, well, technically 4 weeks because we had a little bit of a break in there, but the last 3 sermons my pastor has preached has been about Joseph, primarily about like how he comes to power and the interaction that happens between like his siblings and his dad and all that. So if you have never really, or if you're not what we would call church, or you are a new Christian, or you are just wanting to know kind of what like this whole like gospel thing is about, Genesis is the first book of the Bible. It basically explains like how we got to where we are as far as like our sin problem and how God created the world, how really like how messed up mankind really is, and how God's plan to help fix that is eventually through Jesus. But in Genesis it's shown that it is to go through, he takes a man, Abraham, eventually creates a family, and then how they become a people, and then how they'll eventually become a nation. But them becoming a nation is going to be in the book of Exodus. But Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and some of the major players you see through like chapter like 13 on is the patriarchs. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Jacob's the last one, considered one of the Hebrew fathers, and one of his sons, Jacob, 4 wives, 12 kids, 1 random daughter that shows up in there, 12 tribes of Israel, so on and so forth. That's what we end up with. And as a part of that, one of the sons, the story of Joseph. Joseph is Coat of Many Colors. If you are into Broadway, it's Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I actually personally really enjoy that musical, but that's just because I'm me. Don't watch it. It's actually really bad. But, Joseph sold into slavery by his older brothers because they're super jealous because dad gave him a really nice coat and didn't keep it a secret that Joseph was his favorite. Really great example of how you don't run your family. That's really all I got to say about that one. But here the last couple of weeks we've been talking about towards the end, Joseph is now, he's gone through prison, he's gone through Potiphar's house, they are in the famine that eventually takes place, and how Joseph had become the governor over Egypt, and how his brothers were coming to him in order to get food, so that because of the famine that had basically wiped out or was going through the known world at that time. Okay, so that kind of catches everyone up to speed for kind of what I'm talking about. So one of the things my pastor has been preaching on, and I'm happy, like, I think this is a great discussion, but we have gone over the same passage, so chapters 42 through 46 of Genesis, for the last 3 weeks pretty much. And so we've looked at it from Joseph's view, his brother's view, and today we actually talked about his father's view, Jacob. And it kind of got me thinking about how that is some of the things that we really see throughout Scripture, that the entirety of Scripture is really just God's story, and we're just kind of side characters throughout God's story. And that even in our own lives, it's our lives, and not to discredit like the life that we're living, but we are a part of God's story, and that he is revealed through our lives, whether you're a Christian or not. God's always going to be glorified, even in the hard things. And sometimes we don't see how that's happening, and we don't see how our lives and the choices that we make are going to work in his greater plan. But we're a part of his story. And as we looked at Joseph here the last couple of weeks, like I said, we looked at it from Joseph's point of view, which was basically like, I'm in this completely miserable situation, and I don't know how I am supposed to get out of it or what I am supposed to do, and I am like stuck here, and I don't see like what the way out is. Ooh, I don't know if y'all heard that. I felt and heard it. And I don't know what the way out is. And here we are, like, I'm going to have a plan, and I'm going to save my brothers, and I'm going to save my family, and I'm going to get my dad out of whatever the situation is. And so that's generally like Joseph's viewpoint, is like, my brothers were terrible men. They sold me into slavery. I have one full brother left, which was Benjamin, because remember Jacob, 4 wives, whole thing, bunch of half brothers. And that we looked at from Joseph's point of view, he's like, my brothers were terrible men. I need to get them out. I need to get my youngest brother out, Benjamin. Need to get him out, so that way my brothers can't do anything to him. And but my brothers might suck, but their wives and their children don't suck, because, you know, they're innocent in this whole thing, and they can't help it that they had like crappy dads. So I'm still gonna send them food. And then lo and behold, a lot of back and forth. Eventually they come back. Then last week we were looking at like the brothers' point of view, is that they are full of guilt over what they did, because if we consider like just with the situation with Joseph, like it's like a 20-year time span between Joseph being sold into slavery and then the brothers meeting him again, 20, 22, 23 years, something like that. And we just took a look at, like, from the brothers' point of view, like, they did something that was just horrible. And, I mean, if you read throughout Genesis, you could easily say, like, the morality of his brothers is questionable at best. And now they find themselves in the situation of, you know, they sold their brother into slavery. They don't know if he's still alive. They did something that was absolutely horrible. They've had to live with that guilt now for at least 20 years. And they saw like how that affected their dad too, and they've had to live with that guilt. And then whenever they are face to face with Joseph, and just the test that Joseph gives them, it made them question, like, is all of this happening because of their sins of the past? And I think that's an important thing to hit on. And I mean, like, anyone's welcome to comment on this, what they think about this. But I kind of wonder if that's how we look at things. Like, whenever we encounter bad things in our lives, like, are we encountering these things because we did something bad? And I think that can be a yes or a no answer. This is just me speaking. As I think about it, that there are definitely things that we encounter in our lives that are hard, and they're hard, and we're encountering them because of our sin. Like, we just have no one to blame but ourselves for a lot of it. And I would say, like, sin is almost always going to be the main issue, but sometimes it's not necessarily your sin that causes you to encounter some of these harsh realities and these problems. Oh, that's kind of pretty where you can see the light from behind me. I'll try and stay, like, more or less kind of right here. And I think, like, there are definitely, like, some situations where that happens. There are also times where God allows you to go through hard times and difficult times, because that is how he is going to be glorified through it. I don't know why some harsh things happen. I have a friend in my life right now. Him and his wife are going through a very difficult time, and I'm not even going to pretend to understand the whys, because it is a hard thing that they're going through, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I can't even begin to understand the whys. But there are other friends that I've had through the years who have gone through difficult times, and I'm like, well, yeah, like, I'm like, have you looked at the stuff you've done just in the time I've known you? Like, I mean, like, we could all see this coming from, like, a million miles away. day. Um, but the root cause is sin, and even in our sin, God is going to be glorified. And I think that's a key point that we have to come back to, and that God has a plan and God will be glorified. And no matter how badly we screw up, that plan is still going to happen. Um, I mean, we see that's kind of been the repeat throughout Genesis. Like, if you've been following along or if you've read through Genesis yourself. And I say, like, hey, group, discuss this. Like, how have we tried to screw up God's plan? Like, just in the book of Genesis. And the plan keeps happening the way it's supposed to. And yeah, sometimes it takes a turn that we don't expect, but it still happens. And today, we were talking about Jacob and like looking at things from Jacob's point of view, and how here's this man who lost a lot of key figures in his life all at the same time. Maybe not all at the same time, but over the course of like a decade or so. And then has lived with the loss of people that he truly cared about, people who he really loved. He has seen like all the wealth that he accumulated with his father-in-law basically diminish. He has lost now a lot of his wives. I think almost all of his wives have died. I didn't hit on it like in kind of my conversations on here, but if you go back and you kind of read some of like, the Bible's really good at giving you like an aside. And that is a throwback to high school and English composition and the beginning of college. Is like an aside is like a side story. Like, it doesn't necessarily sound as though it's a part of the main story, but it connects to it. So there's a lot of asides that tend to happen in Genesis of like, here's this random family member that's happening. And it kind of like, once I kind of latched onto that idea, I was like, oh, like the entire story of Joseph is an aside. Like, because you're looking at Jacob throughout all this, and like we just kind of, like took a detour into specifically Joseph for a little while. So that, because if we understand Joseph, we understand then like how God was at work even in this hardest time that Jacob was going through. And part of Jacob's story, like once again, like kind of those aside things, kind of like the build up in Jacob's story is that Reuben was a sexual deviant, pretty much. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Like, you can read it. The Bible does not shy away from it, but very much, Reuben was not a good guy. And then you have like Levi and Simeon, which although they are eventually like their families are eventually like redeemed. I mean, Levi does become the priestly tribe later on. We see though that Levi and Simeon like were mass murderers. Like, they went in and wiped out an entire town over their sister, which my sensibilities as a woman is like, yes, go. But then the other part of me is like, but there were also a lot of people there who shouldn't have. I mean, if you were going to take that attitude, it should have just have been the people, and even that's not really a good attitude. Like, the entire town did not need to be wiped out because of the sins of one man. And then you have Judah, who is also like, has a whole different set of issues, and we see like his own personal aside with it. His own personal side story comes up. But throughout it all, even in the hardest times, we see how God is always working. And we see how, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit of my pastor and talk a little bit about like towards the end is like, Jacob and Joseph are reunited. This family comes together and they get to experience healing. And Jacob will eventually get to give all of his sons a blessing. And how these men come together and they bring their families together, and they eventually end up being able to create this people. 70 people came into Egypt, and they end up settling in some of the best land where they are able to grow and multiply, and they are able to work hard and be able to form this people group that knows that who God is and what he is capable of. And it's just amazing to see how God just took this one random man who was old and who had an old wife, and how he performed miracles and was able to create a family out of someone in a situation where there shouldn't have been able to have been one. And I think when God gives us kind of those side stories, he is showing how we get so distracted by like what God is doing in other people's lives. I don't think we always remember what God's doing in ours. I know I'm like that. I'm sure other people are like that as well. And I just kind of want to like backtrack a little bit to Judah. Like, you should read Judah's story for yourself. It's actually like one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Mainly because one, like, I can't totally ever understand it because I am from the United States in the 21st century. I don't totally understand, and it's not a part of my culture, the whole idea of the kinsman redeemer. I mean, like, I have a basic understanding of it because I've read history books, and I've taken Hebrew classes, and like I'm a student of the Bible, but it's just not a part of my culture, so it doesn't always resonate with me on certain things. And Judah's side story is a beautiful picture about how when it's not handled right, and how people in their limited understanding try to do the right thing as they understand it to be, even when it's the wrong thing, and that God blesses a sincere heart. That with Judah and Tamar, Judah was in the wrong, and Tamar tried to do the right thing as she understood it to be in her context and within her culture. And how God uses that experience to eventually raise Judah up among the ranks of his brothers. If you keep on reading and you get in through like 46 and into 47, and you interact a little bit more with scripture, it's Judah who goes forward to his dad and says, like, listen, you can blame me if anything happens to Benjamin. Have it be on me. I'm not offering up my kids the way Reuben did, but Judah's like, no, we're not doing this. We're not. Like, either we're all going to die here because we're all going to starve, or we at least take Benjamin with us and we try, and if he dies, then we all die anyway. He's like, either way, like, you're putting us in a situation to where we're going to die. It's just, do we want to die because of starvation, or do we want to die because we were killed? And then later, when they're all returning, it is Judah that goes up to Pharaoh and goes in, like, over to Joseph and, like, says, like, hey, we're on our way, we're coming, tell us where we need to go, and we'll go and we'll direct, the caravan to the right place. And then later on, if you read through scripture, you can't get really far away from it, but through Judah, that's where we get David, and that's where we get Ruth, and Boaz, and it goes on, and eventually we end up with Jesus. And it's through this man and this woman who sin and screw up, but God is glorified through it. And it's the same with Joseph. Like, although Joseph is probably one of the few people we would say, like, was a white hat in the Bible. That's an expression I've heard a few different times under a few different teachers. But, the idea that, like, there's no white hat in the Bible, like I said, the Bible is very open and honest about the fact that, like, people suck and we're sinful, and even the best of us suck and we're sinful. And with the exception, the closest thing to exceptions probably really being Joseph in Genesis, Daniel in the book of Daniel, and then probably Joseph, the husband and father of Jesus, is probably the closest that I would say we really get. And even their hats aren't necessarily white, they're more cream colored, they're off-white. Definitely not lily white, because they're still sinful. But we get to see how God can still use someone who is sinful and broken, and how he is still able to make his plan work, and how he is still glorified throughout the entirety of it. And that's just like kind of some of my thoughts. I don't know, like I would say like definitely like huge discussion over different things that we see throughout scripture, but that's kind of where like my thoughts are right now with it. I think it is a good thing to just kind of consider how I just like the idea of it being in the side, and then I will admit, kind of in the sermon today, I kind of got caught. Like, I was like making notes, and then I was like, oh, I latched onto this idea, and I'm like, hold on, I have to make sure like my idea plays out. So that was just kind of where I'm at. I would love to hear a little bit of discussion on this, as far as like, is this really what is happening with some of the asides that we see, and does anyone else kind of see it the same way that I see it? I think it's a good point of discussion about how God is always like redeeming us even in the worst situations. And I would say, like, if you got questions, I think this is in my mind, this is a good topic to like have a little bit of back and forth with. And feel free. I normally try to do, I don't always do it, but I try to do like Instagram posts too that will go along with kind of some of my thoughts, or at least talking about like what the video is. And then if you want to follow my blog, I actually have a blog, roadtrippingwithrachel.com. I try to do a post at least once a week that coincides with whatever like my video is about. So I'm probably going to be like kind of typing up my thoughts and sharing it there. It releases the same day as the videos, so you can go there, www.roadtrippingwithrachel, RACHAEL.com, same as the video, my channel name. By all means, feel free, go there, leave your comments, leave your questions. I do try to look at them. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. That helps out my channel, and it lets me know what kind of content that you are enjoying. And last week I posted a video about my views on body image, body positivity, and weight loss. So thank you to everyone who liked and watched that video. That one was not an easy one for me to post, but I am happy that I've now chimed in kind of a little bit on that conversation, and I feel way more comfortable now about like taking you guys out with me while I am either working out or stretching or exercising. That way we can all do it together and become a little bit more healthy. All right, I will see you next time. Bye.